Welcome to At the Root of Knowledge, where ethics, morality, social contract, and divine law meet in conversation.
Welcome to At the Root of Knowledge. I am Daniel Sheck, and with me is my co-host Philip Barzik. On this show, we are primarily concerned with learning and sharing the truth. We discuss topics such as virtue, vice, human nature, and divine law. Today is our fourth episode in our 7-segment series on the 7 capital sins. Today we will be talking about anger and patience. Hello, Phil.
Hello, Daniel.
Are you ready to talk about anger and patience?
I believe so. I hope I am patient enough to get through this without trying to skip too much, because I have quite a bit to talk about, or that I'd like to cover, I should say.
Man of much material.
Yes, I just hope it's good material. I read one article this past week by Lawrence J. Peter, who was a U.S. educator and writer in the 20th century. He talked about the different advice he had heard on anger and how some of the advice would contradict each other. Like, some people would say to hold it in, don't express your anger. And then other people would say you should express it, because if you don't, it'll cause health issues, or you can wind up being resentful and bitter. And he had this to say about it. The problem isn't that it exists, it's how we handle it. Most people let anger show in outbursts and flares of temper, activating our flight or fight mode, increasing adrenaline and stress levels are increased, and blood pressure rises. This furthers the risk of stroke and heart attack. He argues that we should try to find a way to healthfully express our anger without letting it completely take control and throwing a temper tantrum.
Right. And it can be very difficult to express yourself sometimes when you're angry and you just want to be angry, though. Like, have you ever had it where you just are so fed up and you try and try and try to just let something go, and it seems like it torments you and it will not leave you alone?
Yes, I've run into those situations many times. Especially sometimes you'll have it where it even goes away for a time, or seems like it goes away for a time, and then comes back worse.
Right.
That's an area where I have struggled a lot, especially in my younger years. I feel like I struggled with anger management and my temper in general. I think part of it may have been that I struggled to control my emotions. And maybe another part of it would have also been that I generally just had a hard time accepting when things didn't go my way. Which, I mean, it's really a fact of life that things aren't always going to go your way. Like, bad stuff will happen, things will go wrong. But I feel like earlier in my life, I've definitely, and even still sometimes now, I struggle to accept when things go wrong, even if it's my fault. And I think that's something that some people sometimes overlook is you can have a lot of internal anger, like anger towards yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like when you're like, why am I so stupid? Why did I mess up? Why didn't I do it right again? Like why do I keep failing to hold this commitment? Like why did I listen to that person? Why did I let that bother me?
Mm-hmm.
That type of stuff. I get that a lot.
I would say that, and also I would say just the the feeling of like self-loathing, which I guess you covered that a little bit.
Like when you're disgusted with yourself?
Yes, disgusted with
yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that too. Definitely. And it comes and goes, but I know I look back sometimes and just go like, just shaking my head, like staring at the ground, like, oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I in the same article I read, he listed some popular myths that that he said were unhelpful. One is anger makes you a bad person. Expressing anger is mean and harmful, and you have no right to be angry at others. I
Could you
feel
read those again?
sure. Anger makes you a bad person. Expressing anger is mean and harmful, and you have no right to be angry at other people.
Hmm. I mean, the one anger makes you a bad person.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that kind of goes back to like lust. Like without consenting to, you know, giving in to temptations of lust or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or allowing yourself to subjugate someone to some sort of impure whatever persona or
Mm-hmm.
personification or whatever. Just with anger, at least with me, like the feelings, maybe I have more control than I like to think, but they feel a lot of times I think they just come, you know what I mean? And that doesn't necessarily dictate how I respond to them, but I definitely get angry at people.
Yes. I I agree that it's definitely a myth that anger makes you a bad person. I think also there's different ways you can be angry. As I said, like anger, like internal anger or anger at yourself. But like I think you can also just be angry like in a disappointed way, or you could be angry in like a vengeful way.
So you're saying that disappointment could, are you saying that disappointment could fall in the category of anger or just,
I'm saying that disappointment could lead to anger. But ultimately, if your anger is from disappointment, I would say it's a different type of anger than if your anger is coming from a place of enragement.
right? Yeah, I could definitely see frustration,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when you get disappointed with someone, when someone lets you down, especially if you were counting on them. It'd be very easy to get frustrated with someone and want to withdraw trust. and maybe even not associate yourself with them for a while. You just don't want to hear what they have to say because you're so disappointed. You just need distance from them. I've felt that many times before.
I think that can be a healthy thing. I would say depending on the situation, but I think it can be a healthy thing, especially if it will say it's a toxic relationship or that person's taking advantage of you for some reason. I mean, say they're taking advantage of your time and like they call you over to help them with a project or something, and then they don't even, when you come over, they don't even work on it, and they just waste your time shooting the breeze.
Yeah, talking or doing whatever thing they're doing.
Right. And
yeah,
I mean, there's nothing wrong with talking in the proper proper time, but when you're saying you're going to do something and then you don't do it, and instead you just put it off, I'd say you have a right to be frustrated with them or even withdraw from that relationship. It may not merit a full withdrawal, but
yeah, I mean, I myself, if I tell someone I'm gonna leave and they keep talking, it drives me completely nuts. Or if I'm walking out the door and someone tries to grab me, sometimes it's fine. I'm a touchy, sensitive person, but if I've got someplace to be and my time's promised somewhere else and someone's holding me up, or even if I don't, but I only agreed to a certain amount of time and they try and I told them in advance, I get really, really frustrated, and it's my fault, I think, for how I respond. A lot of times it ends up with just saying bye, walking away, in the middle of a conversation because they won't drop it. But I've had situations like that where stupid little conversations where I get held up 20, 30 minutes because somebody doesn't stop talking, and I didn't walk away because they really wanted to talk about something, so I stopped and listened. And I've had that let that mess up my entire day before, where it's just like I can not get out of that negative mood of just being upset about being held up. Stupid stuff like that. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I think that that spurred a little tangent, I'd say. So what would you say is the average amount of time that a amount of anger would last? Or is there really an accurate amount of time that you can amount to being angry?
It varies a lot. Like, I might go a long time. There's an unresolved issue between me or someone else. It probably won't stop bugging me until it gets fixed. I've had issues in relationships with people before where the problem bothered me and bothered me and bothered me and bothered me for years and years and years, and it did not go away until I told something to the person that I had a bothersome thing with. Like, so it could last for years and come back and forth. I mean, I've had several instances where I've been mad at someone for like a day, like an entire day, just cannot get past. Like, if I felt like someone did me wrong or, did an injustice to me or did something that was just, I felt was horribly disappointing, it could consume my mind for an entire day or two, no problem.
I think what you said about it bugging you for extended periods of time, I think if you ignore that and you bottle it up, it can the end results can be horrific. If you just, especially if it's someone who you see on a daily basis. I mean, even your spouse, if you're mad at them with something, I think Jordan Peterson recommends that you argue in your relationship, like not like
Fight,
not
but argue.
fight exactly, but you argue and you
Mhm.
hash out the details, because when you have unresolved tension between you, it and you don't address it, it grows.
Right. Yeah,
It's
I
like
don't
a
know.
weed. Well, I guess it's not like a weed. It's more like a fungus.
See, I think
Like,
there's a good point there, but I definitely think that sometimes it's just your responsibility to suck it up, because sometimes it's just what you got to do. I I mean, there have been plenty of instances I've been bothered by things that are just so dumb that I shouldn't be bothered about. That, like, why would I bring them up? You know what I mean? Like a
I
little
mean, I agree
sacrifice.
that sometimes you just gotta let it go. Pick your battles. But I wouldn't say necessarily that, like if it means something to you, don't let it go, because it's very easy to just say you'll let it go, but it's another thing to actually fully commit to letting something go,
Right, and
because you can hold it against someone too, and that can show later. And it doesn't have to be a direct correlation. It can just be you have you're holding something against this person, and you purposely make yourself late. You subconsciously purposely make yourself late to a meeting with them, or a date with them, or something.
Mm-hmm.
I think is very dangerous to let conflicts go unresolved for extended periods of time. That doesn't mean you have, I would say, to resolve them instantaneously, because I would say, even if there's still some anger there, I would say there is a cool down phase for anger where you're not boiling mad, but at the same time you still have those feelings of um dissatisfaction between you.
Yeah, I mean, if there's something bothers you, especially if it's in a relationship with someone that you have a close relationship with, yeah, I think it's better to bring it up. I think a danger to that is you projecting your difficulties, your own personal difficulties with coping and with, your mental construct
Mm-hmm.
onto someone else's behavior, pointing the finger at someone and saying, this causes me to get mad. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I've had that in conversations where I've felt myself start to feel like I'm accusing somebody, even though it's not their fault. It's not their fault. There's a lot of things that bother me that people don't mean to bother me with. They just don't understand.
Right.
They don't understand. I'm a very difficult person to have a close relationship with. I would say. Not the most difficult or the most high maintenance, but I can get really touchy, and sensitive. So, and it's easy to project my own struggles onto someone else as something they're doing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that, I don't know, you just need to keep in mind when you're having conversations with that, because it's really easy to come across as you attacking someone
Yeah.
rather than just clarifying what bothers you.
It is really easy to slip into that accusation state. but I think you should still somehow attempt to express how you're feeling. I would recommend, you know, cool cool down about it. Talk with it with another person. I would say one of the best things that I've been able to implement into my life when I get into those scenarios is to get an outside perspective, especially as unbiased an outside perspective as you can, because then it really allows you to differentiate between, is this something that's bothering me that I should be bothered with, or am I just being overly picky and high maintenance about it? I know some people struggle a lot to look for help outside of themselves and their relationship, and that maybe that could be why there are a lot of relationship therapists and coaches and things like that. But I would say whatever resources you can go to that have maybe have a little bit more expertise in that area than you.
Yeah, I mean, especially if it's like a girlfriend or a wife or something, maybe find a different woman, you know, because a woman's gonna have insight that a man won't have, you know.
Right.
Especially the more, some people just think more like other people, So if you know your wife thinks, or your girlfriend or whatever, thinks a lot like someone else or maybe you know one of her sisters, maybe that might be a good person to talk to if you were like in a fight with your wife or in a dispute or whatever, and you wanted to do your best part to, build the relationship.
Right.
I know plenty of guys that have done that. They've had difficulties. I don't say plenty of guys. I know at least one guy, probably more. They've had difficulties with their spouses, and they went to their spouse's sisters and mother, and tried to figure out from their perspective what to do and how to renegotiate.
Right. I mean, you mentioned negotiating. That's really what an argument is. It's a negotiation between two people. It can be a very hostile negotiation, but it's still you fighting for your side and someone else fighting for their side.
Right, you're trying to develop terms, relationship terms.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think. Said argue. When Jordan Peterson argue, was he talking about argue as in like civil debate, or like argument where emotions became violently obvious, or just in general talk about what they believe and try and stand up for their side, or what was he?
Oh, the context.
Mm-hmm.
I think in this particular context, he was talking to a couple who was considering divorce and giving them relationship advice. And I think they were particularly arguing about, they were particularly having trouble with verbal arguments, heated verbal arguments, that is. And he was saying that they should figure out a way, one, that they can civilly continue their arguments to where they can both respectfully yet firmly fight for their respective side without getting into a heated, aggressive debate that could potentially lead to abuse in the relationship.
Right. Yeah, but you say arguing and all that, being able to effectively define your side, I guess, and argue for your side is great, but I think it's useless without the prior firm commitment to be open and honest with everything throughout your life, regardless of whether or not it's in, an argument context. The argument only comes in. I think it's far more important to have developed a relationship where you feel like you can share everything before you even worry about whether or not you're going to argue with them. You know what I mean? Like the argument's just a small component of a much bigger.
Like define what you believe first.
Yes, and like be open about everything before you argue. You know what I mean? Like you got to be confident and comfortable telling them what you think, telling them how you feel, telling them what bothers you, telling them how you're likely to react to different things that they throw at you. All that stuff. Not just when it comes down to arguing, but being open all around, like 360. In the entire relationship, like wanting them to understand as well as they can.
I think that's part of the commitment of being in a relationship, is that you're committed to what you bring to the table. I would hope that you're somewhat strong in the grounds that you stand on as far as morally and ethically, and you're okay with them having a different perspective as far as you two individuals can civilly move forward and come to reasonable compromises. And I think that's where anger, as far as in a reactive way, could be somewhat helpful. That if you are really firm in what you believe, then there will be a certain amount of anger if your beliefs are encroached upon.
Right, or if you feel like you're being called on to defend your beliefs, or somebody misrepresents your beliefs and represents you as that belief that they're misrepresenting. Because when people get angry, people use a lot of devices when they're arguing with people, and one device that I've seen is people will take their opinion of your belief, put it in their own words to suit their context, and then label you as that belief, and then attack you.
Oh, they're arguing with your persona.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the persona they have of you.
Right, that they made of your beliefs, that they constructed, that they misconstructed of your belief. Now, if you've got like a good ethical partner, you're never going to have to worry about it. But, I've seen it happen enough times. And I'm not saying I've never done it, but it definitely happens.
Oh, yes. Plenty. Yes, it does. And it can be hard to find your way out of that and draw the line, if you will, between as far as what is true in the persona that they have of you and what is actually true with what you believe.
Right.
Especially if their description of the persona they have of you is very vague. Especially if it's vague in areas that need clarification.
Right. And they'll put it in a way to be interpreted however they want it to be.
Correct. Someone does usually, that form of arguing does usually result in them describing your belief in a way that benefits their argument.
Right. And I've seen Jordan Peterson in a lot of arguments have basically what I just described to you, where they misrepresent his beliefs, and then they pin those beliefs onto him to target him.
And then they try to
attack him with those misrepresented
beliefs. Yes, they
beliefs.
come at him with accusations.
And what I've seen he does is he takes what they say, he goes, "That's not true. That's not true," and he basically just restates what he says, what he believes, over and over and over and over, and giving more clarification as is necessary. But that really, you cannot fight their fight. Like, it won't work. Like, just because they insult you and they're unfair and they're mean doesn't, feeding that back into the argument is not going to help anything.
No, it doesn't. The end result there is just, you're just playing into their game. And at that point, you're both arguing with your persona of the other person.
Right. It becomes what, unfortunately, we see a lot of today, just bashing, name calling.
Which is horrible because it has no productive means behind it.
Yeah, there's like no utility.
Correct. And that's something that I've tried to figure out about anger is, what utility, if any, does it bring?
It's a very powerful motivator.
Oh, it is most definitely a very powerful motivator. I mean, it psychologically it activates our flight or fight the flight or flight response in our brain, that it prepares us to fight.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be for what we believe in or in an extreme case for our life. And I think one big characteristic of anger is aggression.
Can be.
Okay.
It depends on the person, I think, and the context.
Well, that's why I said one characteristic.
Okay.
I think it's far from the only characteristic of anger. I think another characteristic of anger would be annoyance. You can be very annoyed with someone, and that can lead to anger. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the only trait of anger.
Yeah, I mean, I get annoyed pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if I feel like people are poking at me or asking questions that they have no right or reason to know, and I frankly just don't want to answer. Wouldn't necessarily say get angry at them. This is just from my perspective. But I definitely think they go together. Anger and annoyance.
Yeah.
If you're already annoyed at somebody, it's very easy to get angry at them.
That's true. That's true. Back to what we were saying about the some, if any, utility in anger. You mentioned it's a very powerful motivator. In my research, I found that what most articles that I read were stating was that it seems that in a short term situation, anger can be useful as a motivator. But when it comes to extended periods where you're angry, it is extremely unhealthy and can even prolonged anger causes stress, increased stress hormones. But extreme prolonged anger can even cause damage to the neurons in your brain that relate to judgment, short-term memory, and can even weaken your immune system. So in response, I would say there is some utility in anger or justifiability in anger, but
well, if some things don't, now we might want to go into this more later, but if some things don't bother you, put it in simple terms, don't offend you, do you really care about anything? Like, do you have
any moral grounds?
Right. Have you staked a claim and standing up for something? If some stuff doesn't bother you, it's like, are you going to let that happen? You know what I mean? Like,
right. Just for instance, someone getting robbed on the street. I think that's a pretty general term that, like, if that happened, you would hope that someone would attempt to stop it.
Right. I'm more or less thinking, like, let's say you got your kids.
Okay.
And you love your kids to death. And, there's this one older kid down the block who comes over and he starts influencing your kids. And he gets them to do a bunch of bad stuff,
that you don't want your kids to do.
He gives them drugs. He gets them to go to parties and just, like, do immoral things. And, I don't know, maybe take advantage of them in ways that, well, you could leave up to your own interpretation. Like, you would hope their dad would be a little bit, angry at how would you as a father respond to that? Like, oh, it's fine. Like, you're not going to be upset or perturbed or bothered or,
right.
angry.
I would say you're justified in it, and that's a natural response to that in a situation. I mean, depending on how old those kids are, let's say mid-teenage years, you've spent, we'll say, 15 years of your life trying to raise them to have some form of high moral standard, or at least adopt some of the moral standards that you have. And if you have strict moral standards against what they're doing at the time, then I would say that you have every right to be angry, both with your children, because at that age they should be somewhat responsible.
Mm-hmm.
And you have every right to be angry with the person who's influencing them to make those decisions.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's just one example. Another example would be, your son agrees to pick mom up he just got his license, and he agrees to pick mom up from the doctor's office after her appointment, and the son, whatever, goes off and forgets about her, or I don't know, whatever, goes smokes weed in a parking lot and passes out, or whatever, and you figure out that your mom is your wife, his mom gets left behind in a parking lot at a hospital alone, and her son was nowhere to be found, like you would expect a dad to get angry with something like that. I would hope. Like, I would expect my dad.
But does it have to be the dad that's angry? And
no, or the mom. The mom, you'd expect the mom to get angry too. Like that, you'd expect people to get frustrated with that. Like,
right, and it's not just one person, it's the entire, all parties involved.
right, I'm not saying just the dad. I don't know.
Yes.
I guess maybe I'm talking from a man's perspective.
It could be.
But I have this quote,
Okay.
and it applies pretty well to what we're saying right now, I think, as far as the utility of anger. Therefore, this is Ephesians chapter 4, and this is verse 25 and 26. Wherefore, putting away lying, speak ye the truth, every man with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. Be angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your anger. Give no place to the devil.
Let not the sun go down upon your anger.
Yep.
This could be a very, very
Well, then
simplified
the
interpretation
following
of it,
verse
okay?
is give not place to the devil. This following verse.
Could you read those two again?
Yeah, I can even read the one after that.
Okay.
Wherefore, putting away lying, speak ye the truth, every man with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. Be angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your anger. Give not place to the devil. He that stole, let him now steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands, the thing which is good, that he may have something to give to him that suffereth need. I think my interpretation of this, what they're saying is, or Ephesians was St. Paul, right?
I don't know.
I think Ephesians was.
I have very limited knowledge when it comes to that particular.
Anyways, I think what he's saying is, like, don't be okay with bad stuff. You know what I mean? Don't.
That's what I was going to ask, was when it says
Yeah, it is Paul. St. Paul.
wasn't it be angry and sin not?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a sort of reference to hating to sin
Mm-hmm.
being the only thing that you should hate, and just hating evil in general. But I'm still wondering what if any relation that has to the verse, let not the sun go down upon your anger.
Well,
Because
take an
I
offense.
don't think
Take a crime that you think is highly offensive. Okay, for me, I would picture something like abortion. Okay.
Okay, I mean, we don't even have to say that specific. I would just say murder in general. But
Murder. Perfect. There we go. Murder. You think of murder. Okay. Now, does it upset you that people are out there murdering other people?
yes,
And do you think it should always upset you?
upset me in a way that prohibits me from doing other things because I'm just constantly focusing on all the people being murdered,
Maybe not necessarily.
or
but you're
just it upsets me always in that I never am okay with that happening.
Yes, more of that. You're always upset, that you are always in disapproval. You're not you're not compromising on.
You don't compromise on where you stand on it.
Yes.
So you are angry about it, and the sun never sets on your anger.
Yes.
Okay. I think I understand it a little better now. Because my initial thought was don't go to bed angry. But I don't think Bible verses have such shallow meanings.
And don't go to bed angry. I don't know. Sometimes they're I don't know. Yeah, but anyways, I thought that was interesting.
It is a very interesting verse. Verses.
Yeah, I mean, he goes on to talk a little bit more. That's near the end of the chapter, but he goes on to talk about don't be angry or bitter.
Don't be angry.
I'll just read the rest of it.
Okay.
Let no evil speech proceed from your mouth, but that which is good, to the edification of faith, that it administer grace to the hearers. And grieve not the Holy Spirit of God, whereby you are sealed unto the day of redemption. Let all bitterness and anger and indignation and clamor and blasphemy be put away from you with all malice. And be ye kind one to another, merciful, forgiving one another, even as God hath forgiven you in Christ.
Okay. So, be angry and outraged when there's some evil afoot, but as far as your fellow humans go,
You still have to love them.
correct.
And let all bitterness and anger and indignation and clamor and blasphemy be put away from you with all malice. I don't know. See, the wording, you
can
got to
be
get
a
into the
little-
technicality of the wording, because, like, what do you mean by anger? What do you mean by malice? What was the thought behind whoever translated this verse versus our modern interpretation of words, if that makes sense?
Mhm.
It can, so it's not like it's always technically exact to the same way it
but
was written.
I think that's still there's a general moral construct behind the verse that can be derived.
Right. Hate Satan and sin and love your neighbors. And forgive them. Forgiveness can be hard, though. It can be really hard.
Do you
to
think
forgive.
there's an element of patience in forgiveness?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was actually thinking about that today. Definitely. I 100% think that. I think, like, for me at least, half of forgiveness is patience. Because it's easy, like you were saying earlier, it's easy to say, I'm going to forgive them. And even tell them, I forgive you. But it's
But
still...
actual forgiveness is another thing. I've found that out firsthand, that just because you forgive someone doesn't mean things go back to the way they were before the particular event happened.
Yeah, even immediately. I mean, even if it does go back, like, a lot of times it takes
There's
time.
still, that event still happened, and the person who forgave you still has they still have a different view on you now because of that event, whether they've forgiven you for what you've done or not.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can't go backsies in relationships. Like, once you do something, you do it, and that's with the other person for forever. Even if they learn to live past it, they still know that you were capable of doing it, and you did do that.
Mm-hmm.
People don't forget easily. I don't forget easily. Like,
I mean,
I don't
if you
think I
were to
forget,
forget
like,
easily, I would say,
you got a mental problem.
well, they could be, because at that point it's very easy to be taken advantage of, and it only takes so many times getting taken advantage of to stop acting that way.
Right, but you still have to forgive them, even if you don't, like,
You can forgive them and put that behind you, but that doesn't mean that you
are going to trust them with the same thing
right.
over again.
You're not
It's
going to
like,
go back to the same way that you were.
yeah, it's like, okay, I let you borrow my 9mm, and then you shot me in the foot, and you said it was an accident. I'm going to lend it to you again. Oh, you shot me in the leg one more time. One more time. It'll work out okay this time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
third time's the charm, for sure. Especially with guns, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that patience can be a very tricky thing when it comes to forgiveness. Because part of forgiveness, I feel like, is you're saying that you're ready to have some form of trust in that person again that you're forgiving.
I think you can forgive someone without trust.
How so?
Well, trust is faith in someone's integrity, but forgiveness is just willingness to continue to love someone and not let your love be, in my interpretation, be obstructed by something they did. And I think you can love someone and have unobstructed love, as far as love for your neighbor, without having any faith in their integrity. You can know they're...
I think I disagree with you on that point. I think there is it is necessary to have some trust. It doesn't have to be fully trusting someone, but I think you have to have some form of trust in someone if you were to love them.
What type of trust? Trust that they have value, or what?
I mean, for starters, trust that they're not going to attack you and try to kill you.
No, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. I think you can love horrible people that you do not want to be around at all, and you think are horrible influences or a danger to your life or your family or whatever. I don't think you have to trust anyone at all to forgive them or love them.
Well, then, I mean, what is your definition of love in this scenario? The same as the definition that we gave in our friendship podcast?
Willingness to sacrifice? Yeah.
So, would you be willing to sacrifice for a murderer then? A convicted murderer?
I see what you're saying, but I know that
Jesus
said to love your enemies and love everyone, even people that are horrible. So
I'm not saying that he's wrong by any means. I'm just saying that I think there is a certain amount of trust that goes along with it. If you can't trust someone, I don't know that you can love them. That doesn't mean you can't learn to trust them. But if you don't trust someone, I don't know that you can.
You can love them. I don't think you're right. I don't know that I have a good argument to prove you wrong, but I'm pretty sure you're able to love everyone. Just because why else would Jesus command you to do it if you weren't capable?
Well, but does that mean that you are incapable of trusting everyone?
Yeah, there are plenty of people I wouldn't Wouldn't trust with anything.
Okay, so if you're not willing to trust them with anything,
Mm-hmm. Like, I don't have any faith in their integrity. That's what I mean by trust.
right. But you can still love them.
Yeah. Like, okay, just to use an extreme example, Hitler. I'm pretty sure I'm still supposed to love Hitler, but I wouldn't trust Hitler with anything. Like, I wouldn't want to be. And he's just one person. It's just because obvious. Everybody knows who Hitler is. He's the mustache guy.
Right.
But like, I'm pretty sure, you're still supposed to love Hitler. But I don't think you'd be in your right mind if you trusted Hitler.
That's true, but you wouldn't forgive Hitler.
No. No.
That's my point, is that forgiveness,
No.
trust and forgiveness go hand in hand.
No. I would be called to forgive Hitler.
Well,
yeah, I do not have
I would
this
have to
verse offhand, but I got the verse for you, bro.
Okay. While you're looking for that, in that situation, if I was called upon to forgive Hitler, I would say I'm in no. I'm not a judge. I am in no position of authority to judge my fellow human beings, but I do think that some of the things that he did are unforgivable, in that there is no washing that slate clean.
No. There's gotta be. Otherwise we wouldn't be told to do it. Okay. Okay, this is Matthew chapter 18.
Okay.
I'm going to start at verse 20. 21. Then came Peter unto him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother offend against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Jesus saith to him, I say not to thee till 7 times, but till 70 times 7 times. Therefore the kingdom of heaven is likened to a king, who would take an account of his servants, and when he had begun to take the account, one as brought to him that owed him 10,000 talents. There's another quote somewhere, but it pretty much said very much,
don't withhold forgiveness.
Yes. Yeah, I think there are probably several more, but I know I've read at least one more. Okay, if you want to take his word to the literalness of what he said, that's 490 times you forgive them free of charge.
Okay, but
he didn't say anything about putting conditions on trust on there.
That is 490 times in the literal sense, but if you want to take the literal sense, just in Poland alone, Hitler did kill 6 million Jews, so there's
okay. I see
there
what
is
you're
a
doing
little
there.
bit of a difference there.
I see what you're doing there.
But even so, we can ignore that, because that's not really a valid argument from my standpoint. That we'll ignore it. I think that verse is the meaning behind it is that you should not withhold forgiveness from your brother. Your brother being your fellow man.
Mm-hmm.
But in that, I'm not claiming that I know exactly what is required in forgiveness, but I do think that trust is partly required for forgiveness. It doesn't mean that trust has to be complete and it has to go back to where it was. But I think there is still a form of trust in forgiveness. That if I was to loan someone my 9mm and they were to shoot me in the foot, I could forgive them for shooting me in the foot by not wanting to take an eye for an eye.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I trust them to not go get someone else's gun and shoot me in the other foot. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to trust them completely the same way I have previously trusted them and give them my gun.
Yeah. That's okay.
So would you say there is definitely an element of trust in forgiveness?
No. I'd say they're mutually exclusive. I mean, I'd say trust makes forgiveness easier. But I guess, like, do you have to trust someone? Do you have to trust anybody? Like, some random dude off the street, do you have to have any trust in him?
You don't have to, but it's real. You're going to have a really hard go of it if you don't trust anyone.
Okay.
You don't. Coming from the standpoint of being a Catholic, you do have to forgive. And I guess I don't think there is a verse that says you have to trust
your neighbor.
Right.
I don't think there is either.
But I think trust is implied in the word neighbor. I mean, if you didn't trust your neighbor, why would you live next to them?
There is a verse. This is great. There's a verse where Jesus actually defines who your neighbor is. And I think that's in St. Matthew too.
Okay.
It's in Luke. Okay, Luke 10:29. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Okay. He was saying stuff about, I don't know, he's talking to Pharisees or something. But he, willing to justify himself, the dude he was arguing with, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" And Jesus answering said, "A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among robbers, who also stripped him, and having wounded him went away, leaving him half dead. And it chanced that a certain priest went down the same way, and seeing him pass by. In like manner also a Levite, when he was near the place, saw him pass by. But a certain Samaritan, being on his journey, came near him, and seeing him was moved with compassion. And going up to him, bound up his wounds, pouring oil and wine, and setting him upon his own beast, brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 pence and gave it to the host and said, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou shalt spend over and above, I at my return will repay thee. Which of these 3, in thy opinion, was neighbor to him that fell among the robbers? And he said, That showed mercy on him. And Jesus said to him, Go and do thou in like manner. There's another verse that was not that I didn't realize that was a Good Samaritan story. I thought there was another verse, but anyways,
I was gonna say that doesn't seem necessarily like it applies.
it's not a strict application
Correct.
in the context I was trying to say. But he did say,
because you aren't treating those robbers like they're your neighbors.
"Mm-hmm." I don't know. I feel like I need to talk with Father Jenkins
Okay.
and get like
Maybe we can continue this debate at a later time.
Yeah.
Okay. I would agree with that.
We're getting really stretched out there. But yeah, that's an interesting thing, and definitely very relevant. Very relevant.
I believe
And
so.
you could be right, but
I think I could be, but I could be wrong.
yeah.
I'm definitely interested. That's just my perspective. That does not mean it's fact by any means.
Right. Well, you know, you're one of those entitled ones. You're entitled to your opinion.
Well,
That's what the kids are saying
I
nowadays, right?
see.
Or,
I think
or
most
is it that you're
people-
entitled to my opinion? Is that the common one?
I think that's what they're saying. I think everyone's entitled to their own opinion, even if that opinion offends someone else.
No. You have a right not to be offended.
Well, in that case, we shouldn't be having this discussion.
Yeah. In order to think.
In
you
that
need to
case, we
risk-
shouldn't have had the discussion over the past 15 minutes on our own opinions,
Yeah.
especially if they're conflicting. So I do have a question for you.
All right. Shoot.
Let me find it. Do you think anger is a secondary or primary emotion? And by secondary or primary, I mean a primary emotion would happen naturally, and a secondary emotion would be the product of other emotions.
Now, are those categorical classifications?
Yes.
Okay, so that it's not distinguishable from levels or
No, it would be, say, that, just for example, anxiety is a primary emotion. Or that
so anxiety is
sad-
caused by other stuff.
Anxiety is caused by other external stimuli, but it is an emotion. But you could become angry because of anxiety.
I think it's both. You know, you can definitely choose to be angry at someone. You know what I mean? You can.
But could
you
that
can
anger?
find offense.
But
and turn
offense
it into,
is offense an emotion that causes,
could be.
or disgust? Disgust causes anger.
It could definitely lead to. It could definitely other things can lead into it. We were talking about like annoyances, disgust could easily lead into anger, but I don't think something else necessarily needs to cause anger. Anger can be. I'm pretty sure it can be like a premeditated thing where you know, pretty much decide you're going to get mad at someone and do that.
You just are going to get mad at. You're going to find something to get mad at.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. I think it's both.
I think that's fair. I tend to say that it is more secondary,
Like, as
or-
in you choose to do it, or as in...
as in it happens because of other emotions.
Okay.
It is the product of other emotions.
Yeah, I'm not
I
a
think it's an
psychologist.
impulse, but
I'm not a psychologist. That's something I'd really... To give you a really accurate answer as far as, like, with my developed opinion, I would have to do a lot more reading up. But just from what you've told me, I would say it would go into both.
okay. I'm no psychologist either, but I'm just
Not
taking-
yet, anyway.
We'll see. We'll see.
Ah, you got your glasses over there. You already look like you're about ready to be reading people's minds and...
I think
Changing
that's a
lives.
psychic, not a
Oh,
psychologist.
that's right.
It would be
There's a
it would
P,
be neat
so-
though. So, do you think patience is something that you can have too much of?
Well, who was it? Okay. Saint somebody listens to this, they're going to get Introduction to Devout Life. It was a doctor of the church. Can't remember.
Saint Thomas More,
No.
Saint Cyril,
No. Anyway,
those are just the ones I can think of off the top of my head.
no. He basically talked about virtue and his role in life. And there's a lot in this book that was just over my head, and it was Francis de Sales.
Yes.
It was so gosh, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not smart enough, not spiritually progressed enough. That's probably it. And smart enough, probably not smart enough either. But to understand what he was saying. But one thing I did get from what he was talking about when he was talking about virtue is there were like 3 virtues that he said should be embodied in everything you do. Man, I really wish I had the book with me. But there were like 3: gentleness, can't remember if he said patience or not. Anyways, but he gave 3 virtues, and then he said all the other ones you should only apply as they're applicable. Use them as tools, only when you need it. You know what I mean? Like, don't use a screwdriver when you need a wrench.
Hammer.
Yeah, or a hammer, or whatever. Yeah, don't use a hammer when you need a screwdriver. You know what I mean? But I can't remember if patience. I can't remember if patience was one of the ones. I know gentleness was one of the things that he said should basically go with everything you do. But reading that interpretation, if what he said was accurate and patience wasn't one of the virtues, which I don't think it was, one of the 3 virtues.
So it should be applied in moderation.
Yes,
Okay.
I think. I'm not a theological
I think
expert.
it should be too. I think that if you have too much patience, it can definitely be a detriment in certain situations. I mean, if you have too much patience while someone's trying to defuse a bomb, that could be catastrophic.
Right. I think, like I said, it's applicable.
That's an extreme example.
There's patience, and then but maybe patience isn't what's needed in another circumstance. So why would you try and apply patience to something that takes what would be another virtue where you need to act? I don't know. When you
meekness?
No. I don't know. But when something else is needed that requires you to move quickly, why would you try and apply patience just
Oh, I see.
plaster
I see.
patients on, try and use a screwdriver where a hammer's needed. Or a
Correct.
hammer where a screwdriver's needed.
Yes. I think that's it's a good metaphor there.
Yeah, I really need to get that quote. I'll find it sometime.
Okay.
Don't let me forget.
Okay, maybe we can reference that in our next podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we've done a pretty good job of covering anger and patience. I'm sure we've missed some areas of it. And I'm sure there's more that we could cover, but I think this is a good spot to wrap up on.
Yep, I think so too.
So
I'm sure we'll come back to some of the stuff we've talked about.
I indeed hope we do. But I know we talked about some of the usefulness of anger, how it can be a powerful motivator, how over the long run it can be a detriment though. We've talked about anger in relationships. We talked about how it can really affect a relationship in a bad way and in a good way. We talked about some ways of coping with anger. In particular, we talked about patience and how patience can be different from something like forgiveness, or how patience can be different from something like trust or loving someone. We talked a little bit about having too much patience. We also tried to define a little bit of how anger is maybe a primary or a secondary emotion. And I think we also talked about how patience can really lead to bad situations if applied in the wrong way.
Thank you all for joining us tonight on At the Root of Knowledge. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and comments. If there's any topics you would like us to discuss in the future, please feel free to comment. We'd love to hear what you guys think, what you think of what we said today. We're open to your thoughts. All right. Thank you and goodbye.